In the late summer of 480 BC, the largest army the ancient world had ever assembled was moving south through northern Greece. The column stretched so far that when the front ranks stopped to make camp, the rear was still marching from the previous day's starting position. They drank rivers dry. Herodotus, not a man given to understatement, says it took 7 days and 7 nights for the army to cross the bridges at the Hellespont, marching without pause. The soldiers came from 46 nations: Persians, Medes, Egyptians, Ethiopians, Indians, men who had never seen each other's homelands, marching under one king's banner toward a narrow strip of coastline where the mountains nearly touched the sea. At that strip of coastline, blocking the only road south, stood roughly 7,000 Greeks. Most of them would be sent home before it was over. The ones who stayed, 300 Spartans and 700 Thespians, knew exactly what staying meant. This is the story of Thermopylae, not the version on the movie poster, the real one. It is stranger, darker, and more interesting in almost every way. To understand what actually happened in August of 480 BC, you have to understand Sparta. Not the Sparta of the movies, the real one. And the real Sparta was one of the strangest civilizations that has ever existed on Earth. Start with a fact that surprises almost everyone. Sparta had 2 kings, not 1, 2, always, simultaneously, from 2 separate royal families, the Agiads and the Eurypontids, who had shared the throne since at least the 8th century BC. They ruled together, checked each other's power, and frequently hated each other. Leonidas, the hero of Thermopylae, was an Agiad. His co-king, Lycurgus, a Eurypontid, was off fighting the Persians in a completely separate theatre of war at the same time. The movie never mentions him. No one ever does. Now consider the structure of Spartan society, because without it, nothing about Thermopylae makes sense. Sparta was built on slavery. Not slavery in the way most ancient civilizations practiced it. Individual ownership of captured foreigners. Sparta had enslaved an entire neighboring population called the Helots, primarily from the region of Messenia, conquered centuries earlier. The Helots outnumbered Spartan citizens by a ratio that ancient sources estimate at anywhere from 7-1 to 20-1. They farmed the land. They did all the labor. They made the entire Spartan system possible. And the Spartans lived in constant grinding terror that the Helots would revolt. This is the detail that changes everything about how you understand Sparta. The legendary Spartan military machine, the training from age 7, the barracks life until age 30, the obsession with physical perfection and battlefield discipline, was not primarily designed to fight foreign enemies. It was designed to suppress a domestic population that vastly outnumbered its masters. Every part of Spartan life was organized around the fear that one day the Helots would rise up and kill them all in their sleep. Plutarch records that the Spartan secret police, the Cryptaia, would send young men out into the countryside at night to murder Helots who seemed too strong, too confident, or too capable of leadership, not as punishment for any crime, as prevention. Aristotle called Sparta's relationship with its Helots the central weakness of the entire system. He was right. It would eventually destroy them. But in 480 BC, Sparta's immediate problem was not the Helots. It was Xerxes. Xerxes I, king of kings, ruler of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, had assembled what ancient sources describe as the largest military force the world had ever seen. Herodotus, our primary source, writing about 50 years after the events, puts the number at 1.7 million soldiers. Modern historians consider this a wild exaggeration. The current scholarly consensus is somewhere between 70,000 and 300,000, with most estimates clustering around 100,000 to 150,000. But even at the lower estimates, it was an army that dwarfed anything the Greek city-states could put together. And here is a detail that almost never makes it into the popular telling. The Greeks knew he was coming for years. This was not a surprise attack. Xerxes spent 4 years preparing the invasion. He had a canal dug through the peninsula of Mount Athos, a project so massive that Herodotus says it took 3 years and thousands of laborers. Specifically so his fleet wouldn't have to sail around the dangerous cape where his father's fleet had been wrecked a decade earlier. He built 2 pontoon bridges across the Hellespont, the narrow strait separating Asia from Europe. When a storm destroyed the first set of bridges, Herodotus claims Xerxes ordered the sea itself to be whipped 300 times as punishment and had shackles thrown into the water. Whether this is literally true or Herodotus being dramatic, the point is clear. This was a man who believed he could discipline the ocean. The Greek city-states had plenty of warning. They held conferences, they argued, they sent spies, and characteristically, they couldn't agree on what to do. The Greek world in 480 BC was not a unified nation. It was a collection of fiercely independent city-states that spent most of their time fighting each other. Athens and Sparta, the 2 most powerful, had fundamentally different societies, different values, and deep mutual suspicion. What brought them together, temporarily and imperfectly, was Xerxes. And the plan they eventually agreed on was this: hold the narrow coastal pass at Thermopylae with a ground force while the Greek navy engaged the Persian fleet at Artemisium, a few miles away by sea. The pass was the key. At its narrowest point, the so-called Middle Gate, the road between the mountains and the sea was reportedly wide enough for only a single wagon. An army of millions would be functionally irrelevant in that space. Only the men at the front could fight. Now here is where the myth and the reality begin to separate. Leonidas did not march north with 300 Spartans to hold Thermopylae alone. He marched with 300 Spartiates, full Spartan citizens, the elite warrior class. But they were accompanied by their helot servants, probably at least 1 per soldier, possibly more. And they were joined by allied forces from across the Peloponnese and central Greece. Herodotus gives us the full list: 700 Thespians, 400 Thebans, 1,000 Phocians, 1,000 Locrians, and contingents from Arcadia, Corinth, Mycenae, and others. The total Greek force at Thermopylae was somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 men. That is not 300 men standing alone against an empire. It is several thousand Greeks from multiple city-states holding a defensible position against a much larger but geographically constrained force. Still heroic, still desperate, but not the lone stand that the legend describes. So, why does everyone remember only the 300? Partly because Sparta had the best publicists in the ancient world. Their entire culture was built around the production of memorable one-liners, what the Greeks called laconic wit, named literally after Laconia, the region Sparta controlled. When Philip II of Macedon sent a message to Sparta saying, "If I invade Laconia, I shall raise Sparta to the ground," the Spartans reportedly replied with a single word: if. That is not accidental. That is a culture that understood the power of narrative compression. 300 sounds better than 7,000. So 300 is what survived. The battle itself lasted 3 days. On the first 2 days, the Greeks held the pass. The Persians attacked in waves. Herodotus says Xerxes sent in the Medes first, then the Scythians, and finally his elite immortals, the 10,000-man royal guard. The narrow pass neutralized the Persian advantage in numbers. The Greek hoplites, with their heavy bronze shields and long spears, fighting in tight phalanx formation, were devastating in close quarters. Herodotus records that Xerxes, watching from a throne set up on a hill behind his lines, leapt to his feet 3 times in alarm as his troops were driven back. A detail that rarely gets mentioned. The Greeks fought in shifts. Different contingents rotated in and out of the front line to stay fresh. This was not a continuous 3-day brawl. It was organized, tactical, and disciplined. The Spartans fought at the center, but they were part of a coordinated defense, not a solo performance. Everything changed on the evening of the second day. A local Greek named Ephialtes, whose name literally became the modern Greek word for nightmare, went to Xerxes and revealed the existence of a mountain path called the Anapeia Trail that led around the pass and behind the Greek position. Xerxes sent his immortals along the trail overnight. The 1,000 Phocians who had been posted to guard the trail detected the Persians at dawn, but were quickly outmaneuvered and retreated to a hilltop to make their own stand, leaving the path open. When word reached Leonidas that his position had been turned, he knew it was over. This is the moment the myth crystallizes. Leonidas dismissed the bulk of the Greek army. Why exactly he did this is debated. Herodotus says it was to spare them. Some modern historians argue the allies simply left, and Leonidas put the best face on it. Others suggest he kept a rear guard specifically to cover the retreat of the main force. A tactical decision, not a suicidal gesture. What is certain is who stayed. The 300 Spartans stayed. So did the 700 Thespians, who volunteered to remain and fight to the death alongside them. This is the most undertold part of the entire Thermopylae story. 700 men from a small city called Thespiae, not professional soldiers, not members of a legendary warrior culture, just citizens who decided they would rather die than leave, stayed and fought and were annihilated alongside the Spartans. Their names are mostly lost. The Spartans got the monument, the Thespians got a footnote. The 400 Thebans also stayed, though Herodotus claims they were held against their will as hostages and surrendered to the Persians during the final battle. Theban historians disputed this for centuries. The last stand took place on the third day. Knowing they were surrounded, the remaining Greeks advanced from the narrow pass into the wider part of the road, abandoning the defensive advantage of the bottleneck, and fought in the open. Herodotus says they fought with spears until the spears broke, then with swords, then with hands and teeth. Leonidas fell early in the final engagement. A savage fight erupted over his body. The Greeks drove the Persians back 4 times before recovering their king's corpse. They retreated to a small hillock behind the wall, the Kolonos, which archaeologists have since identified, and made their final stand there. The Persians overwhelmed them with arrows and infantry. Every Spartan and Thespian died. Xerxes was reportedly so enraged by the casualties Leonidas had inflicted that he ordered the king's body beheaded and crucified. This was a profound violation of Persian custom. The Persians normally treated fallen enemy commanders with respect. Xerxes' fury was itself a testament to what the defense had cost him. Here is a number that does not get enough attention. Persian casualties at Thermopylae. Herodotus claims 20,000 Persian dead. Modern historians generally consider this inflated, but accept that Persian losses were severe, likely several thousand, including 2 of Xerxes' own brothers, Abracomes and Hyperanthes, who died in the fighting. And here is the strategic reality that the legend tends to obscure. Thermopylae was a defeat. The Greeks lost the pass. Xerxes marched south, took Athens, and burned the Acropolis. The population had been evacuated, but the city itself was destroyed. What Thermopylae actually accomplished was time. 3 days. 3 days for the Greek fleet to engage the Persians at Artemisium. 3 days for Athens to complete its evacuation. 3 days for the Peloponnesian states to prepare their defenses at the Isthmus of Corinth. And perhaps most importantly, 3 days that demonstrated something the Persian command had not expected: that Greeks would fight to the death rather than submit. 1 month after Thermopylae, the Greek fleet destroyed the Persian navy at the Battle of Salamis. The following year, a combined Greek army shattered the Persian land forces at Plataea. Xerxes withdrew. Greece remained free, and the mythology machine began turning Thermopylae from a tactical defeat into a founding story of Western civilization. There is a philosophical thread running through this story that connects it to everything else this channel explores. The Spartans were not Stoics. Stoicism wouldn't exist for another 2 centuries. But the Spartan concept of discipline, the idea that a man's value is measured not by what he accumulates, but by what he can endure, runs directly into the same current that Zeno and Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius would later formalize. Plutarch, writing centuries after Thermopylae, records a conversation between Leonidas and his wife Gorgo before he marched north. She asked him what she should do if he did not return. He said, "Marry a good man and have good children." Not a dramatic farewell. Not a speech about glory or duty or country. Just a practical instruction delivered without sentimentality. Because to a Spartan, sentimentality was a form of weakness, and weakness was the only thing they genuinely feared. Diogenes Laertius, the same source we rely on for the life of Diogenes the Cynic, records that later Stoic thinkers pointed to Spartan training as a crude early form of what they were trying to achieve through philosophy, the elimination of unnecessary desire, the cultivation of endurance, and the acceptance that external circumstances, including death, are not within our control, and therefore not worthy of fear. Epictetus makes this connection explicit in the Discourses. He uses the Spartans at Thermopylae as an example of men who understood, instinctively, if not philosophically, that the only thing a person truly controls is their own response to circumstances. They could not control the size of the Persian army. They could not control the betrayal by Ephialtes. They could not control whether they lived or died. What they could control was whether they stayed. They stayed. The inscription that was placed at Thermopylae after the battle, attributed to the poet Simonides, reads, "Stranger, go tell the Spartans that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. Not here covered in glory, not here having conquered our enemies. Just, we did what was asked of us, and this is where it ended." There is something in that simplicity that 25 centuries of mythologizing has never managed to improve upon. Every embellishment, the abs, the capes, the slow-motion combat, takes something away from what actually happened, which was a group of men standing in a narrow pass, knowing they would die and choosing to stay anyway. Not because they wanted to be remembered, because leaving was not something they knew how to do. The Thespians, who have no movie, understood this too. 700 ordinary men who made the same choice as the 300 legendary ones and then vanished into history while someone else got the monument. Maybe the lesson is not about Sparta at all. Maybe it is about Thespiae, about the people who do the right thing for no audience, with no expectation of being remembered, and who are proven correct when no one remembers them. If these stories stay with you, consider subscribing. There is more to come.